Welcome back to the Know Your Numbers REI podcast. This is your host, Chris McCormack, and today we have another special guest in the name of Aaron Letzeiser. He is the co-founder and COO of OBIE, a venture-backed insurance and risk management technology platform serving the 17 million real estate investors in the United States. OBIE's digital quoting platform and instant rate options make it the easiest and most transparent way in the market today for investors to obtain coverage. Prior to founding OBIE, Aaron started and grew several successful companies that he's seen to an exit. In addition to his work at OBIE, he is an active real estate investor and a venture partner at the San Francisco-based venture capital group Pioneer Fund. Aaron graduated from Michigan State University and was named to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Aaron, welcome to the Know Your Numbers REI podcast. That's quite the introduction. I would love to just give you any space to introduce yourself a little bit further if necessary.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Happy to be on the podcast today. That was quite the introduction. I appreciate it. Not much else to add there. Spent a lot of time in the real estate space and now also in the insurance market as well. So started at OBIE with my brother Ryan. His background was real estate private equity. He's the one that gave me the real estate investing bug, and both of us got very frustrated over the years with it was one of our largest line item expenses, but the one we always felt like we had the least amount of control and insight into. So that's really where OBIE came from and what I spend probably a large majority of my day focused on.
Wow. Awesome. Yeah. It's funny because we were just talking, I was traveling. We're just recording this after the Easter weekend. So we were traveling for Easter, and with who we were with, we were talking a little bit about insurance, and a lot of times you get this coverage, you pay these massive premiums, but then they don't always pay out when you need them the most, or you don't know if they're going to pay out when you need them the most, or it takes 6 months, 12 months, a year and a half to get them paid out. So what makes OBIE different than the traditional insurance coverage? It seems like you're very investor friendly and focused on the client, the customer. So take us through a little bit about how you have differentiated yourself from maybe the traditional insurance company.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say that the first thing is, we built this company with our real estate investor hat on. So the questions that we ask, the way that we approach coverage, the options that we provide to you really take you through a journey of like, what is the end goal for you? Are you the type of investor that wants to be able to like sleep really well at night? You're worried about the fact that people are living in your home, right? Like we see that a lot with our like first time landlords, right? They had that condo unit. That was their baby. It was the first thing they bought. And then they moved out when they had a family or they just needed to upgrade. They moved into that first home, but they didn't end up selling that first condo unit or townhome, whatever it might be. And so that's their baby, right? And somebody else is living in it. And so if you're somebody that needs that added, peace of mind, that's what insurance can kind of do for you. Or maybe you're somebody that really looks at that P&L and says, hey, it's really important this year. We had to renew the lease, but we had to take a little bit of a haircut on rents based on where the market's at. And so we really want to optimize cash flow. And so how can we do that to be able to get the best coverage, but then also recognizing there's a couple of things we might want to be able to cut out so we pay a little bit less. So that's really the approach that we took. And the differentiator for OBIE is that we do almost everything instantly. So OBIE is available in all 50 states. We can instantly underwrite practically any like single family rental up to small apartment building in the US. Obviously some larger stuff takes a little bit more time, but the biggest focus there was taking our frustrations of feeling like insurance was a black hole. You even mentioned it, like, what are you paying for, right? You've got these coverages, you've got all these docs, you're paying a lot of money for it, but what are you actually getting? And so our goal, and one of the things we said early on was we wanted to put owners in the driver's seat. And one of the ways to be able to do that is to utilize technology in a way where you submit the information, you're going to sit there and go through our quoting flow, and then there's going to be a rate that's presented at the end. And all the different combinations that are right in front of you, because our experience originally was we had to go to an agent. That poor agent then had to refill out that information and go to a bunch of carriers. And then there's some poor guy as an underwriter sitting in front of an underwriting model trying to figure out, okay, this is the exact rate. Then it goes back all the way through that process for you to just get a PDF quote. Well, Chris, you might be like, hey, you know what? Actually, I'd rather take the cash flow this year. What does this price look like at a $5,000 deductible? What about a $10,000 deductible? What if I just went like, replacement cost value on some of this stuff, or maybe a different type of valuation method? Well, every single one of those is you going back to your agent then, and that agent's going back to the carrier, and no carrier is going to print out 50 different combinations for you.
Right.
And so that's what folks get at the end of the OBIE experience is you can sit there and customize to your heart's content. And then on the back end, which is also something you mentioned, is like when you have a claim, how long did that claim take? What are they actually going to pay? What we really value at OBIE, and what I think a lot of our clients value as well, is exactly what it is then that you paid for, right? Did you decide you want that higher deductible? Well, crap, if you get a water event and it's going to cost you $5,000, clean the place up, you got some drywall damage, but you decided to take a $10,000 deductible. You got some ownership there, right? Like you knew that you took that gamble. And the opposite's also true, right? Like maybe you wanted to really pile all this stuff in there because you're the type of person that wants to use that insurance. And so putting the owner in the driver's seat, really making them a master of their own destiny, that was the goal. And that's really the differentiator at OBIE.
Wow, that's great. And I've found that most real estate investors get into it because they want to be in the driver's seat. They don't want to put the money in the retirement account or the stock market like the traditional way. They want to invest in real estate so they can leave their W-2 and do it a new way. And so it sounds like you're kind of matching the profile of the traditional real estate investor by offering a new product and service. And I think my question to you was, first off, how long has OBIE been around, and what was it like in those initial stages? Because it sounds like you did this because personally you struggled with the insurance industry. So how did when you were launching this company with your brother, how was that initiated, and how has it changed since those initial days?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely started in order to solve a problem that we have. We got started back in, 2017, 2018, sold our first policy in 2019. And insurance is the iceberg model, right? Clients, even myself, right, with my own home or auto insurance, you see, 10%, right, of what's actually going on. And 90% is really what's going on underneath the surface. So there was a lot that we didn't know. I think that naivety probably was helpful to us, because if we had known what booting up an insurance company was going to look like, we might not have started. But right. It's been quite the journey. And I think like we've been, again, very successful because we only focus on this space. So if you go to like the really big insurance carriers that exist out there, they provide coverages for 100 different things, right? And hundreds of different businesses. This is the only thing that we do. And I think that allows us to get really surgical in terms of how we price risk, how we get to know our clients, where our clients come from, the different partners that we have. And then as a result, because we only work in this space and we know the types of exposures or risks that work in this market, it allows us then to take a look at our client base and say, okay, how can we continue to drive really effective pricing for you, right? Like, how do we look at the risk that you have? How do we look at the property that you purchased? What are the things that you're doing to proactively mitigate that risk, right? And how can I reward you as a really good real estate investor, right? A really good operator of this asset? Because we really, I think, intimately know and understand how this market operates.
Yeah, that's good. How did that knowledge come about? So it sounds like you're a real estate investor yourself. Take us a little bit through your real estate journey and the properties you have, how you got started, and ultimately where you're at today.
Yeah, I got started again. I mean, my as I mentioned, my brother, I think, kind of put the bug in my ear. He had grown into a portfolio of probably about to 2,500 to 3,000 properties or doors under management at any given point in time, him and a couple other folks. But again, like in the real estate space, that's not huge, right? That's still not like an institutional player. There was still a deal by deal shop buying, apartment complexes or small rental properties. And so, that's really what got started for me. It was about trying to diversify out of, the traditional public equities market, right? How can I have a little bit more control over my investments and my future? And I think followed a journey that most other people, also go through, right? Which is you buy the first one, you get involved in that, maybe do it with a friend or something, you get a little more comfortable, maybe some family, and you slowly continue to grow from there. So I've always been focused in the residential space. Something that I heard somebody say years ago was, you don't always need a place to shop, but you always need a place to live. And so when I was first looking at like, do I want to spend time in retail? Do I want to get into like small office or self-storage? And I figured, the thing that I know is a house, right? At the very least, getting involved in that way, getting started from that perspective, that was the easiest way for me to jump head first, I think, into the real estate space. So I had a couple other, assets, built up a small portfolio. And then as OBIE has grown, we've slowly, I think, gone through and, work through dispositions on some of those assets so we can focus a lot of our time and effort on making sure that we're continuing to grow this company.
Right. That's cool. And one of the things that I know that you're very well-versed in is being able to find the property or the location. It seems like one of the things that I think you're pretty, dare I say, masterful in is knowing where or where not to buy a location. So shifting away from insurance for just a bit, what has helped you determine what those good locations are? Obviously, it's got to be something that somebody wants to live in, but what have you looked for when it comes to location, both at the very small level? So like what's around the property, and even maybe geographically, like where in the US to invest in, and how you come about those decisions?
Yeah, I would say, early on as a real estate investor, I invested where I knew, right? And I think that that's probably pretty consistent with, a lot of your listeners and how they got started. You want to know the areas that you're investing in. You want to be able to drive by that property on a regular basis if you need to, right? Like everybody is that nervous initial investor on their first property. And I think I was the same way. Over time, it's gotten a little bit easier to start, investing outside of the immediate geography, right? So we have properties still in the Carolinas, which is a market that I like a lot. Up here in the Midwest, we do have something, I'm located here in Chicago and the property taxes are awful, but, rents can keep up. So there are some gems here in the Chicagoland area. And again, it's close to where I live and operate. We have some other folks in Michigan. And I think the Midwest is also becoming an area where, as the Southeast and as potentially the Southwest to some extent has gotten a little overbought, whether it's Texas, Florida, some other areas, there's a lot of really good, I think, opportunities still in the Carolinas, but definitely in the Midwest. And then to your question about how we find them, unless it's an area that we really know well, there's always kind of this might not be true as much anymore because they're everywhere. But, 8 to 10 years ago when we first got started, the new Starbucks method, right? The new Trader Joe's, the new Whole Foods, right? Like where can you figure out that the market is already going to? What are those other services and large scale businesses where you as, maybe a hobbyist or part-time real estate investor, like how can you leverage a large corporation's like real estate development team, right? Somebody is doing a lot of work to say, yeah, this is where I want to put this Trader Joe's. This is where I want to put this Whole Foods. This is where I want to put this Walmart in. This is where we want to upgrade this place from a regular Walmart to a Walmart Supercenter. This is where we want to throw a Starbucks. That type of information, especially in like the early development phases, that's really powerful because I think it can start to give you a bit of an indication on where folks that spend millions of dollars a year to analyze this stuff, where they also think the market is moving.
Yeah. It's kind of like that Wayne Gretzky quote or analogy that he uses. Like it's not where the puck is right now that you should be skating, but skate to where the puck is going. And so follow those people that are investing billions of dollars in finding the bucket. The Amazon warehouses. Like why are they putting one in Shakopee, Minnesota of all places? And there's probably something.
Yeah. I mean, even, we've heard of folks that take, like school ratings, right? Like there's platforms out there now that actually will give you some of this data in terms of where some of these other companies are starting to grow from. And one of the new ones is like school rating, right? Has the school rating continued to increase progressively over time? Can you look at that over time comparison? And as those school ratings continue to go up, that like not only is the area continuing to develop, but there's more resources that are going into that area. There's more investment in that area. There's people that are going to want to move now then closer to where good schools or good grocery stores or good outdoor shopping or whatever that might be. Those services are things that, again, like you can leverage somebody else doing the work and really, Huckleberry Finn your way through it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's so good. Appreciate those insights. I think going back to the insurance idea and taking more of a, I guess you could say, tax and legal perspective from it. One thing that we often see, especially with people beginning, or maybe they have a decent portfolio and their biggest question is, should I get an LLC? Should I be more just covered by an insurance policy, an umbrella insurance policy, all these things that come into this decision, especially when you see more regulation coming out about like what you need to do to register entity structures and keep in compliance. So as an insurance provider, as an expert in the industry, what are your takes on how the investor should approach protecting their assets, but doing it in a way that keeps them in compliance and is the best bang for their buck, which seems to be what OBIE is all about?
I would say at OBIE, we can cover you regardless of whether or not it's in your own personal name or inside of an LLC or even inside of a trust. I think the decision around whether or not you want to put it into an LLC, that's a decision that, you can have with an attorney or legal advisor. There's obviously tax benefits as well to talk through with an accountant. On our end, from an insurance perspective, there is, and this is, inherent in the name, there are known like protections that you have operating an LLC, right? Or a limited liability company. You're limiting your liability and your overall exposure there. But one thing you mentioned, which is really important, even if you aren't a real estate investor or a big one yet, is, umbrella coverage. The assets that you have, throw a $1 million umbrella can cost anywhere from as low as, $100, $150, $200 a year, right? And like that's really good peace of mind that you have, that in the event that something happens, especially as you as a landlord, you can't control the friends that a tenant has over. You can't control that they might have Amazon dropping off packages to their place 3 times a day. You're not always going to be available there to make sure that you get there before the mail person or anybody's coming onto the property and it might be slippery, right? Somebody trips on the snow or on the ice. Those are all the things that can really lead to large claims. And you want to make sure that you yourself and your family are protected. An umbrella is probably the best way to do it. One of the other things that you mentioned on the LLC front, I did read this recently, which it hadn't occurred to me in the last 10 years, but obviously given where rates have been on the mortgage side, folks always want to, I think, like talk to their legal advisors around being careful about moving a property from your own personal name into the name of an LLC, right? Mm-hmm. Can that then, depending on the way that your loan covenants are structured, does that technically or legally be considered a change of control? Can they call a loan, right? And more often lately, we have been hearing some folks that are saying, hey, yeah, I did a simple quick claim deed and I moved the property into a trust or into an LLC. And there's a caveat in your loan agreement, right? And you might be paying a sub 3%, sub 3.5%, sub 4% mortgage. And that bank might just say, hey, we'd love to get our money now and get off of this, right? So that's definitely one that recently has come up. Before probably 2022, I'd never heard of a bank actually doing.
Well, yeah, we have heard that. And it does seem to be a big concern for our clients and just people out there on the general market. But I agree with you in that this is more of a legal conversation, but I appreciate your insight. I think the umbrella policy is a great alternative. It is pretty amazing that you can get something so cheap that can protect you and give you such great peace of mind. Speaking of peace of mind, how have you as an operator of OBIE provided that peace of mind to the clients that you have that are looking for, okay, yes, I have the right amount of coverage. I have it on the right things, right? They know that they're protected if a disaster happens. And then I also know that if a disaster happens, I'm working with a company that is going to benefit me and pay me what I deserve and what is rightfully mine. How have you been able to work that out as somebody in this space and looking to take it into the next generation, really?
The biggest thing that people can look at is, an insurance company's rating, right? So every insurance company, they go out and they get rated by a company called AM Best. It's very similar to, your Standard & Poor's or your Moody's, right? Giving financial ratings to things. And you want to find somebody that's got an A- rating or better, right? That means like really good, excellent financial stability. That's your indication that in the event the worst happens, in the event you got a disaster or a total loss, that company is in a position to be able to continue to support the payout of claims in a really good, timely, and responsible manner. So we only offer programs that are A- or better. We've got an A and an A+ program as well. And so that's the initial peace of mind. I think beyond that, it's also how can OBIE through both a personal, but also like a digital experience provide a sense of risk management and risk mitigation, right? What are the things that we can remind our clients to be able to do? You're never going to be able to stop a hurricane. You can't stop a tornado, but you can figure out ways of having good reminders of saying, hey, we've had clients that, their tenants had a fire and that tenant literally told them that they've never used a fire extinguisher before. They don't even know how to use it, right? So they had that kitchen fire and they just left. They ran out, they called 911 and that was great, but there was a fire extinguisher right next to the stove underneath the sink. Right. And so little things like, hey, here's where the master water shutoff valve is, right? You come over here, righty tighty, right? And you turn the water off, right? You have a fire inside the kitchen. Here's the fire extinguisher. You pull the pin, you pull the thing, right? And you point and you aim. These are the things that, it seems silly sometimes, but you want to be able to try and protect yourself from having to make a claim on something that could have been within somebody's control. Again, you can't stop that hurricane. You can't stop that tornado or that wildfire, but you can hopefully try and at least decrease or limit the damage that might come from a water event or a fire event, right? Like those are the two biggest causes of loss inside the property.
Wow. That's good. Yeah. I've never really considered that, like during your walkthrough of your property with your new tenant, like, hey, this is where the fire extinguisher is. This is how you use it. Cause that alone can prevent a lot of issues, and just ignorance is not bliss. So that's good to hear.
No.
What are you guys doing because we are obviously tax and accounting related. So we're always looking at the bottom line, and insurance, as you said, it seems like you started this company because the rates were just going up. You weren't even sure what you were paying for. So how have you guys clearly mapped out, like not only the coverage, but like this is what you'll pay and this is as low as it can be. So how are you, because it sounds like that's part of your value add is that they can do it from their couch. They can get it immediately, but they can also have peace of mind that they're saving money while doing it. Have you worked out relationships with insurance companies or what's going on behind the scenes that people might not be aware of?
Yeah. So we operate very much like an insurance carrier. We effectively borrow an insurance carrier's license, right? We operate as a program administrator or a managing general agent, which is known as an MGA. That means that we got one program in the market and we're specific to just that market. So that's the way that we operate. We're not going out to, your standard carriers. We don't typically operate like an agency or a typical insurance broker. And so from that perspective, again, we want to keep every real estate investor's P&L in the back of our mind. Everything that we do, we recognize that a good purchasing experience, a good online experience, a pretty looking website, that really only goes so far. As a business owner, even as a real estate investor myself, what I care about is, what does cash flow look like? Am I going to be able to cover my nut on this property? And is there really any mailbox money at the end of the month, right?
Mm-hmm.
After I pay everything else that I've got, like what does my financial state look like? And for that asset, am I a value hold kind of person, right? I really don't care about making some of that cash flow, or do I need some of that, right? Do I need that cushion? Am I relying on it? And I think what OBIE does, unlike really anybody else in the market yet, is we give you that opportunity, right? We're allowing you to see in real time the changes that you make to that policy. So if you want to increase the value, if you want to add on endorsements, you want to make sure that you're getting a certain type of roof or certain type of siding coverages, you want to add on flood, right? You can see that price right in front of you. You can have your P&L and your pro forma on one screen, and you can have OBIE on the other, and you can say, all right, this is the price that I can take to the bank, right? And as you're looking at that P&L and you're looking for ways of, I'm so glad I didn't have any vacancy, but I couldn't increase rents on the existing tenant. I'd rather take that than have 30 days of vacancy and have to list it. What else can I do? Where can I cut some costs? And normally insurance was never a place you'd be able to do that. You'd have to go out to a bunch of different agents or carriers and then hope to get some options back. And you still don't really understand. And that wasn't really your choice to pick. And so from that perspective, that's what we wanted to give to people at the end of the day. We wanted you to be able to know exactly what it was that you were paying for, and then to be able to adjust that based on your specific goals and needs as a real estate investor for that specific property.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. Have you seen, how has it been since, it sounds like you've been here since 2017. So is it sticking, or are people enjoying themselves? What are some of the customers saying, if you will?
Yeah, people like us. We've got thousands of reviews. I think we're like a 4.9 star rating. I think, again, it's about that transparency, and the pricing is good. Don't get me wrong, but that experience, I think people appreciate that the age demographic now of real estate investors is really moving into a generation that has grown up with an iPhone and has an expectation of technology. And if we can meet those needs while also being able to be that digital advocate for you and your property, I think people appreciate that. So we've had a lot of success over the last several years, being able to continue to drive really good innovative solutions for real estate investors in this space. We started in a couple of states. We're now nationwide at this point, and really being able to, I think, keep our end consumer and our perfect client in mind as we continue to grow and iterate.
Yeah, that's so cool. I do have some questions more in your personal story. So you do have quite a bit of success in the startup world. It seems you've scaled a few companies to exit, and now you're working through OBIE. You're nationwide, having just started out with a few states. What are some of the biggest learning experiences, or somebody who might be starting a company? Because we do have people that are entrepreneurs and in that startup phase or in that build phase. What have you learned in your time building these companies up, and even at OBIE for the past 7 years, having been through the ringer, I'm sure, but also being able to be on the other side? What's your keys to success in startup to growth when it comes to business ownership?
The biggest thing I would say, and we received this advice years ago when we were first getting started, is do one thing and do it well, right? Figure out the market or the solution or the product that you can become a master of. That is advice that we didn't take early on. We tried to be all things to all people. We weren't just in the residential space. I would try and help you out if you've got you got the craziest commercial buildings on earth, right? Because we were just getting started. And, you love that early validation of this customer is interested. It's not in my wheelhouse, but I'm going to figure it out for them. And so to some extent, that's great. It feels great because you're certainly onto something, but there is a lot of value in becoming that expert, right? And that's something that we have learned, I think, time and time again, both at this company and at others, that if you can become a master at something, if you can do one thing and do it well, you really do end up finding success through that. And then the second piece too is talk to the people in your network, right? Don't be afraid to tell people that, you want to go out and potentially quit your job or start a new business or start a new company, but ask the direct questions. People love to always tell you, hey, yeah, that sounds great, right? Like Chris's new product, it sounds great. It looks great. I love it. And then Chris, you get to be like, well, all right, are you going to pay for it? Right? Yeah. Like if I build this, I'm going to come to your house, right? And I'm going to say, hey, I built this for you. I'm ready to go. I can do this. I've got this service business, or I've got a software platform, or I'm an insurance agent. And then I'm going to ask you to actually sign up, right? Are you going to do that? Right. And I think that was the other big learning and piece where everybody would love to have their stuff quoted. Why not? Right? There's no downside. But when push comes to shove, if I just match the rates that you currently have with an agent, is that good enough? Do I have to save you 5%, 10%? Right? And if you tell me it's 10%, then you get to go back to that person and say, hey, I did it, right? I met your expectation. That's always the biggest piece, right? How do you find that product market fit, and get really true, candid feedback from your intended customer base?
Yeah, that's so good. I think we quickly saw that the niche and specializing was best, not only for us as a business, but also for the client, right? As the creator of OBIE and specializing in residential insurance, you know that you're able to give them the best insurance. You know that because you've seen so many policies and you're able to judge what works and what doesn't. And similarly, like taxes for only real estate investors, yeah, you're saying no to a lot of business, but it's like now we know what the big challenges are and how they can save and where they're overpaying. And so I think it's the same for any other business, right? Like doctors, the best surgeons are neurosurgeons focusing only on the brain, or heart surgeons focusing only on the heart. So I'm with you there. What are some of the challenges that you've come across? It sounds like in the early stages, niching down was hard. It sounds like asking for business and money was a bit of a challenge. But now as you've kind of established yourselves and you continue to grow, what are some of the challenges that you guys are facing right now?
The biggest challenges right now are where do we go from here and how do we continue to provide more value, right? The piece about an insurance company, insurance is really just a financial product that insurance companies are just trying to make like a predictable margin, right? Much like any other business. And how do we continue to use data and how do we continue to use the information that's at our disposal to be able to drive really good competitive pricing in a way that like also creates a sustainable company, right? How do we continue to provide that service to folks? And so as the business grows, the more data that we get, the more opportunity that we get to continue to, I think, refine our own products and get better in this space. And then I think that, the next big question, which I think harkens back to the original piece about specializing is what's next, right? Yeah. What do we do from here? Do we branch out and say, oh, we want to do small office or small retail? The residential side has worked out really well. Do we want to do that? Or do we want to go really, really deep in this sector, right? Do we want to continue to eat up market share? Can we do that quicker if we only sit there and just focus on this space, right? That's the interesting opportunity that's in front of us right now. And probably the thing that, leads to the most amount of challenges, but eventually provides, I think, the most amount of clarity once you make that decision and know what the path forward looks like.
Yeah, definitely. And you guys are kind of in the middle of making that decision, it sounds.
That's the big piece of, probably the first half of 2024 is what do we do right now, right? And how can we best do it? And that takes a lot of, much like our real estate investments, you model it out. Right? What's the best case and the worst case scenario? What are the benefits to doing it? What are the cons? Working through that. And then that provides you a lot of clarity in terms of who you hire, how you hire, where you put your dollars in, right? It's much like when, on the real estate side, it's well, I can replace I've got enough money to replace the counters with floors, right? Which one, as some prospective renter is looking at your listing photos on Zillow, like what's going to drive that extra $50 per month in rent, right? Is it really going to be the floors? Is it really going to be the granite countertops or whatever it might be? That's the same analysis at this point, right? You want to start with just being a landlord, just being a real estate investor. Now what do you do next? How do you continue to optimize that bottom line?
So good. I love it. It's like, I do like the way that you think analytically. It's like, okay, is this going to provide more value? Is this going to lead to more customers, satisfied customers? Or is this? And you do it on your real estate properties and you do it in your business. So I think that's why you're at where you're at with growing portfolio as well as a growing business. So honor to you, Aaron. I think before we close, I do ask one question to all of our guests. And as a new guest, you have no idea that it's coming. So there's a surprise waiting for you. But before we get to that, any last minute thoughts on what the listeners should be aware of, things that they might not be thinking about when it comes to insurance? Because honestly, for some people, it could be a pretty boring topic, thinking about insurance and paying for insurance. But I think this is a crucial topic for our listeners in terms of saving money and being protected. And as an expert in the industry, do you have any parting thoughts about what somebody should be looking for when it comes to insurance or things that they should be considering that they might not be?
Yeah, listen, I agree. Insurance is boring, right? It's fun going to market and figuring out how you do it, but like nobody likes insurance. My auto and home renews in like 2 weeks, and even I'm not looking forward to that. And I live in this space every day. I think the biggest thing that I can leave your listeners with is if you're a real estate investor from an insurance perspective, if there's one thing to always pay attention to other than the price and what your goals are, it's what is your replacement cost, right? Again, this is something that 3-5 years ago wasn't that big of a deal. But as inflation has gone up, as costs have gone up, take basically the amount of property coverage, right? You don't have to get into the 50 pages of docs. It's going to be on the front page. It's going to be on your declarations page. Look at how much property coverage you have. That is your replacement value, right? Divide that by your square footage and say, okay, is $120 a square foot enough, right? Is 150, is 200, is 250. And remember, that's not just the amount to rebuild it as if you have a completely flat piece of land and you're starting from scratch. That's potentially knocking down a burned out building, remediating the property, and then rebuilding. Do you have enough coverage? And I would say that if folks look at nothing else on your policy, that is the biggest piece, because if you're paying for insurance, you want to make sure that you have enough of it. And if you don't have enough replacement cost coverage, then nobody wants to rebuild just the first floor of their home, right? And that's the thing. If you're going to pay for that insurance, make sure that you're covering it appropriately from that perspective if the worst happens.
Yeah, that's so good. And if they think the replacement cost is too low, they can go on to OBIE's website.
Yes, they can.
Get a policy right then and there.
And they can get it right. They can get it right then and there, and they can make that decision, right? Like that's the best piece. You can sit there for a half hour and go through every combination you want. You can add the coverage that you want. You can add the limit. If you think you're undercovered, please, it's easy to do. Our quickest client has done it in less than a minute.
Wow. Come on. Honor to that guy too, because making decisions quick. I like that.
Yep.
That's awesome. Well, Aaron, we have gotten to the end of the interview, which means that we get to the last question. And it's a question we ask all our guests here on the Know Your Numbers REI podcast. And that is, Aaron, what is one truth about money that most people regard as myth?
One truth about money that most people regard as a myth. You can make money by not spending it.
Wow. All right.
You can, I think given where the market's at right now and how the market's performed over the last year, you can make money by not spending it.
Wow.
That is probably a timely truth right now. Although the market's been doing, hopefully 2024 is the turning point for that, and that becomes more of a myth again.
Yeah. No, I love it. That is counterintuitive, according to most people who say you got to spend money to make money. So I love that. That's a first on the Know Your Numbers REI podcast. So thank you, Aaron. And I didn't even ask you, did I butcher your last name when we joined?
No, you got it. You got it. Most people butcher it, but you got it. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Of course. How can people get in touch with you, contact you, sign up for OBIE? What are the ways that people can reach out to you if they like what they've heard?
Best thing is to go directly to the website. It's obieinsurance.com. So OBIE is OBIE insurance.com.
Awesome. We will link that in the show notes. But Aaron Letzeiser, it has been a great pleasure. Thank you for coming on here, sharing all your wisdom and changing the industry. That's what we're all about here at Better Books. For the listener, if you are interested in learning more about OBIE and capitalizing on what they're doing in the insurance space, go to obieinsurance.com and get a quote and make a decision. See if you can beat that 1 minute time span that their quickest client has signed up in. But we trust you guys enjoyed this. Until next time, God bless you and keep moving forward.